chapters of this book to fill in the deployment stuff that's not in the EdBot book. So we already talked about this stuff, and if you've been doing the extra credit projects, which I see quite a few people have, you've been doing it. So you dip the Windows Automated Installation Kit, and you prepare a Windows pre-installation environment bootable CD or DVD. And this is the same as it's been for many versions of Windows. There's a limited free version of Windows which you are running when you're installing. And the box pops up to ask you what your password is and what partition you want to put it on. It's actually running Windows. It's the pre-execution version of Windows, pre-installation version. And then you use that, you boot it on the machine that is your template, you make a reference image of that machine, then you save it on a server or someplace else where you can, or on portable devices or something, and then you distribute it to many computers. And then there's a service and management tool to control what packages are on there. And you're supposed to prepare the machines with sysprep first. Microsoft has been saying this for many years. In practice, for many years, people don't bother using sysprep, and it seems to be fine, but Microsoft keeps telling you you're supposed to. Anyway, so as you saw, the Windows Automated Installation Kit, when you download it, it's an ISO image intended to be burned to a disk and installed from disk, but you can use 7-zip to go around that. And it's got the Windows System Image Manager, which is the main thing you use to make your automated answer file. And it's got ImageX, which lets you make a copy of the installed version. And also apply it to the new machine. It's got DISM, which lets you update machines. DISM replaces the old technology called Slipstream. In Windows 2000 and Windows XP, you could have an installed Windows XP, and then you could put on Service Pack 2. But you could also have the installation file, the i386 file full of installer files, and you could run an you use a command line tool and use a /slipstream switch, which adds the Service Pack to the installation files. So when you then install from those files, it's already up to Service Pack 2. And this is really important because when people store images on servers at corporations, the image will get out of date. And when a machine crashes next year and you deploy the image, you'll have an out-of-date machine on your network which could get infected. And that's unprofessional. So what you do is you use this DISM to update your installer. Every time I also put a patch on machines, you also put a patch in your installation files, and then when you re-image a machine, it'll be right up to your level of patches. So this is a necessary thing to do. You could get around it with using virtual machines and stuff, but you don't need to. They give you the ability to control it that way. So we talked about the pre-installation environment. This is what you're going to need to boot every machine to, so you can capture an image or deploy an image. And the user state migration tool, which you used, I think, a bit in the lab, to copy the user data from an old version of Windows and move it to another. It does not move installed programs, but it does move settings if those programs have already been reinstalled on the new machine and they're ready to receive the settings. Yeah.
So with the DISM, or or slipstreaming or whatever, is that why wouldn't you just update the image, or is it because some of the features are things that you can't put in the image?
No, I don't think it's just
like
that. What you could do is you could install the image in a running machine, put on the update, and then take another image. This just makes it faster.
Okay.
Because, of course, that's kind of going forward and then back again. This just puts the patch right in the files in the image.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just a convenience. All right, so OSCG image, now you don't need to use a third-party tool to burn images from ISOs to disks or back and forth. Microsoft now provides one. So this is like I say, this is the free lightweight version of Windows. You can boot it from Pixie if you set it up to boot over the network, which is really nice. Then you don't even need to carry around disks or anything. You just press F12 during boot up and boot from the network, which is very nice. Kind of hard to set up, though. A lot of people do carry around DVDs or USB flash drives to every machine to boot from. You can even put it on a hard disk as an option if you want to, but that would be rather strange. Because you don't want to boot to this to get any normal work done. It's not a fully functional version of Windows at all. It just has a few options so you can deploy an image. So you make a disk with copy CPE. You create a local build directory so you can put in the installer files. Then you make an ISO image of this and burn it to a DVD-ROM. And then you have to add ImageX into it, which you did in the projects. And then you have so you build a custom pre-installation environment that has the limited version of Windows and whatever tools you think you're going to need. And usually the only tool that matters is ImageX. But if you were to need some fancy driver or something, you could include that too. You may remember back in the old days, you could install Windows and it would say press F6 to put in a driver for your RAID. Well, and it has to come in on a floppy too. The modern solution to that is not to do it that way, is to include it in the installer files yourself. Make your own custom installer that has whatever drivers you need in it. Anyway, so you can create a reference image and store it in various formats. You could actually store it as a VHD if it's ultimate. And then your reference image would be bootable, and that would be a nice solution to problems like what we were just discussing. Suppose you wanted to boot it, put on a patch or something. For example, suppose you wanted to update your video driver, and your video driver probably can't be updated with that Windows image tool, I think, because it's not a Microsoft product. So you want to just run it, put on the driver, and then save it. If it was a VHD, that would be convenient. You wouldn't have to convert it at all. You could just run it as a virtual machine, update it, and then save it again. Anyway, but that only applies to Enterprise and Ultimate. The other thing is just an image on a network share. This is usually what you do if you're not using Enterprise. You store an image of the machine on network share, which you may, if you ever use Ghost, Ghost is very similar. You have a Ghost image on a network share, boot to PXE or carry around floppies to boot from, or CDs, and then it just goes to the network share and deploys it. Yeah.
Can you play it on from a USB drive instead of a DVD or CD?
Yes, absolutely. And you often have to, because you might have a netbook or something you don't have. Yeah, any kind of bootable medium would do. I don't think a floppy anymore. I think it's all too big to fit on a floppy, but nobody's using those anymore anyway. All right, now you have to have an answer file, right? Because otherwise, when it installs Windows, it's going to ask you a bunch of irritating questions like the product key and the password and what kind of network you want to connect to. And you don't want it to ask you any questions. You want it to just deploy automatically across your enterprise. So you make an answer file, which is brought to the machine on a USB stick or something, and then it creates this thing, an XML file that has all the answers. There are a few example files that come with Wake, but you'll see here there's a few examples, but you'll in the lab you'll go through the process of creating one. You do the I think Project 11. You run this long, complicated GUI, and basically you're creating this plain XML file that has all the answers. And here's what install.wim looks like. It's just a big file, 2 gigs here. That is the entire installed Windows. This is the modern version. In the old days, like Windows XP, you would have an i386 folder with a setup.exe and then a folder called sources and just hundreds of files in there, little programs that would run to install every piece of Windows. Now it's all just zipped into one thing called install.wim, which is essentially a zip file containing all that stuff. But it's a whole system image in one file. Very much like Ghost. And so I'm not going to do this one live, but let me just point you at the project if you haven't already done it. Down here, here's the Wake files. And so when you make an answer file, oh yes, so we'll see my Word doc. I really switched to using plain HTML for my instructions, and I thought, I see students doing their homework where the instructions are on their cell phone. Anyway, it's nice if you have plain HTML. HTML scales to different sizes better. Anyway, so you download and install the installation kit, and you create the bootable environment. By the way, one nasty thing is when you download this, it thinks it's on a CD, so you have to remove the read-only flag from it, or you can't use it. That's annoying. Then you run this thing here, Windows System Image Manager. It's this big empty frame, and it's got these distribution share here. You choose which image you want to put on. You may remember we talked earlier, when you install into a virtual machine from a Windows 7 professional install disk, you can install any version of Windows you want. It will let you choose any version. You won't have the product key, so it'll start complaining after 30 days, but you can install any version. And the same thing's true here. Even though you're starting from Windows 7 professional disk, you have the ability to create an answer file for any image from it. And so now you'll go through the stages: Windows PE, offline servicing, generalized, specialized, out-of-box experience. There are these phases of Windows booting up. And you have a long, long list of components to choose from, so you have to find the right ones here and add them to the various passes of installation. So Microsoft had a list on their page of how to do this. You have to make these items and 2 of those. This creates a partition. This modifies a partition to do things like put flags in it, like make it the active partition. Then this is many other things that have to happen. These are the questions that it would have asked you, like what partition do you want to put it on, what kind of networking do you do, what is the product key. You're just choosing here to answer all those questions right away beforehand here. And then it'll ultimately just save a text file that has all the answers. And when you point the installer to that, it won't ask you any more questions. The one thing that is extremely difficult to do in like a lab environment is to get it to take the product key. The single-use product keys we get from DreamSpark really don't play nice with this. This is intended to be an enterprise version with a volume license key. So often what you'll find is even after you've gone to the work to make it totally unattended, it still wants you to type in the product key if you're just practicing in a lab. But if you really are a corporation where they have a volume license, then you won't have that problem. And that makes your answer file. So when you're done, just make sure you don't have any errors. When I did it a couple of years ago, I got 11 warnings but no errors. Now I think they finally updated stuff, so most students get no warnings and no errors, which would be better when you get it right. The more important thing is you get no errors. That means you have a proper answer file. All right. Now, make this big again. All right. So I got a few iClickers about that. Go grab one if you need one. Oh. So what tool captures the image? Good, 30. All right, and that's image X, of course, the popular answer. All right, which one brings in the data from your previous Windows version? That's the user state migration tool over here. Can't think of any much. The other answer, that's the point. User state migration tool for the enterprise or command line. That's what moves the user data.
Yeah, I know. Just how come it doesn't register any as E?
What's that? What? What happened?
Did you push E2?
I pushed E.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, you might have. You probably
Yeah,
won't.
but it doesn't have any list.
Yeah.
It didn't have any. Look at the.
That's
Oh.
I pushed E also.
Oh, it didn't have any. I thought. Oh, I thank you. Well, I wonder what's wrong here. Maybe you had your finger in the wrong place, but I shouldn't be marking those D's right. I assumed those were right. Anyway, let's clear it. Let's move forward and see if anything bad happens on the next one. Anybody vote E?
Yeah.
2. Well, there may be a flaw in the system. This is unthinkable. Well, let's try something else. Let's just turn on this thing and turn this on. Okay, press E. Wait, it should be listening. It's not listening at all. What's going on? Oh, there we are. Oh, good. Now it's getting them. Okay. All right. There seems to be a flaw in the system. Let's charge ahead. All right, which one creates answer files? Let me just stop this and restart it because it's got some old data in there. All right. Go ahead and do this one. Let's see if it works.
Yes. So.
My perfect iClicker system may have a flaw. Right, so it looks like the answers are in. Let me stop it, and let's see if those answers make any sense. Well, that looks better. Did anybody press E? Well, maybe it's right. A is the right answer anyway. I think it's somewhat believable. Let's charge ahead. All right, which one serves as a temporary operating system on the machines that are being imaged? This is another reason why I don't like using right clickers for anything other than extra credit, because they're not 100% perfect. Well, that looks reasonable. Windows PE is the correct answer. All right. Well, that one happened that one time. One other thing I see sometimes is the number of votes goes up to double what it should be mysteriously. So occasionally this thing freaks out on me. All right. So, system image goes on tight. I said you get paid guard there we go. All right, so we talked about that. This is the same stuff we had before. All right, so you're going to make a reference image. You could put it on a VHD like we said before, but you're going to restart boot from the DVD and then use Image X. Now, the first thing you do is you run sysprep. You install the operating system, you put on all your applications and all your settings and your custom desktop background and whatever you need to have on your official corporate machine. And then before you make an image, you run sysprep because that machine has some personal stuff that you don't want to duplicate, like the local password and its IP address and stuff like that that really shouldn't be exactly identical on every other machine. So the purpose of sysprep is to remove all, this is what calls generalize. You saw it in the boot up board. This removes all the machine-specific information. That's the idea. This is, by the way, a weird thing to do, and after this, the machine is effectively unusable. You'd have to do a little bit of installation next time you restart it. So you wouldn't want to sysprep a normal working machine that people are using. You only do it as your last step to prepare something for imaging. Then, this removes, it generalizes things, including the drivers, by the way, because you do not want to necessarily assume all the machines you're sending this image to have exactly the same hardware. They don't need to. So it's going to remove hardware-specific drivers. This is actually very nice, and a couple of generations ago, Ghost could not do this. It was a problem. If you took an image from one machine and imaged it back to another machine with a different hard drive, you'd get a blue screen of death. That is no longer true with Windows 7, neither with Ghost or with the Windows deployment tools. You can totally image it back to a different machine with a different video card, different hard drive, and it will be just fine. But it will install the drivers automatically. Anyway, so next time you boot it up, it'll show you the Windows welcome and ask you some questions. So there is another bit of installation happening when you restart a sysprepped image. It'll be like a brand new computer you bought. You may remember that it shows a little cartoon and asks you for your administrator password and such when you first start out. So if you want to preserve the out-of-box device drivers because you have some driver that is not playing fair with Windows and will not go out automatically, you can put that in your answer file, saying don't remove this driver during the generalized step. All right, so create your bootable P medium. You make a local directory, use ImageX to include it on your ISO. You can exclude drivers from the image, and you can or require it not to remove drivers. Remember, these INI files are used to control this process. You create your ISO file and burn it with any third-party burning software, and then you can have a boot up. This is what's in the official instructions in your book. When you actually go to the Microsoft website, there are a bunch of instructions that are missing here, which will ruin your whole day. That's why I wrote the projects to include the right way to do it. You have to actually copy and rename WinPE to a different name, or it won't find it. And the amount the imagery changes, you have to configure the BCD store so it'll boot, and you have to use DISM. So there's a TechNet article that really has better instructions. This is the problem with this deployment stuff, and it used to be much worse. This used to not even be part of Microsoft certification. It used to only be done by in-house executives at huge corporations like Dell. And so Microsoft never really finished these products, and they never really finished the documentation for these products. It's only now that they begin to regard this as a mainstream activity, and so the documentation is what I would call like a sort of a beta at this point. So you have this kind of ridiculous stuff happening, where there are official documents from Microsoft that don't tell you how to do it right at all. They only tell you about half the steps. Anyway, other documents do. So copy PE, that's your copy of the Windows pre-execution environment. You can choose your architecture. This you can't get wrong. You cannot install an AMD on an Intel platform and have it work. That is some mistake I think that Dell made one time. They actually, either Dell or HP actually shipped 1 million laptops that wouldn't even boot because they put the AMD image on Intel or something like that. Anyway, that has to be right. So you copy it, put 32-bit Windows in this folder. Use OSCD image to write the boot sector there, so this thing will be bootable. and then you put it on a network share. So this is how you can capture the installation from your reference machine on a network share display. You boot to a PE media, you capture an image, and your limited windows, and the PE is capable of making a network connection and connected to a share, and you just use a command line tool to capture it to the share. That's typically what you do, and then you'll deploy it from that share to all the other machines. So, now our questions. How many of these can be run from a VHD? All right, and that's only Enterprise and Ultimate that can do that. Whoa, all over the place. But you had this one last week. Microsoft is very proud of this feature, where you can actually run your virtual hard disk or boot it in VMware or out of VMware, but you can only do that with Enterprise and Ultimate. You can install these on a VHD, but you can't boot them. I don't know why they even bother to tell you that.
Run.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the point of that is, installing it if you can't run it. But anyway, it's one of those Enterprise Ultimate features. All right, which tool creates an ISO file? Pretty sure it's OSCD image. Let me flip back. Okay. Yeah, OSCD image is the file that creates the ISO file. That's what I thought. All right. Good, a pop answer. Like I say, I have a pretty weak understanding of this, and it's okay with me if you can. But you just got to start getting used to it. It's kind of confusing, and it's the first time you see it, you got to get used to the basic features of the tools. There are a few questions about it on the test. All right. If you want to mount a WIM file, so you can change it. Remember, in the old days, you would just open the i386 folder and you go right in there. Now the WIM file has to be mounted if you want to modify it. All the files that need for installation are all included in one container called the WIM file. Good, 30. All right, pretty sure that's DISM. Let's go back here. Yep, that's DISM. DISM is what mounts the image and takes that single file and mounts it as a folder so you can modify the folder, the file settings. All right. So it's this one here and it's DISM. All right. We'll go through these steps in the projects. All right, which tool creates a reference? Image of the reference computer. It looks like there's only A, B, C, and D. All right, the right answer is present. Been there before, that's David checks that makes it good. All right. All right. And which tool removes hardware-specific information? So your image can then be deployed to different hardware. SysPrep. By the way, I'm on several Microsoft certification tests I've taken and make a big deal out of this, out of trying to trick you with SysPrep. Apparently, a lot of people think SysPrep is used for some other purpose, like to prepare a machine for use, or prepare a machine before you install Windows. There are a lot of questions that ask you, the tool, to invite you to make this foolish assumption. SysPrep is not anything you would normally use at all. You never do it to a machine that someone's going to use. You do it to a machine before imaging it. And from a standpoint of the end user, SysPrep breaks their machine. So it's not part of a normal single installation at all. It's only part of preparing for these mass deployments. All right. And that's as far as I wanted to go, really, in this stuff today. I think it's enough. What I highly recommend is doing these projects. If you haven't, you'll go through all these steps. Making the answer file, making the little medium, capturing an image with ImageX, and then making a VHD. You don't go all the way as deploying stuff. That didn't work very well with the product keys we had. It turned out to be pretty painful. I think a lot of you might already be done with this course, as far as the scoring is concerned. So let's see how the scores look.
I forgot your name, though. I know your face.
Well, a few of you anyway.